Hello, and welcome to this quiet corner. It's calm here, the kind of calm where the air feels like it's draped in soft fabric, where the sound of your own breath blends with the small hum of the room. Outside, night stretches wide, the stars hanging like frost in the dark. Imagine for a moment those same stars, not as fixed lights, but as beacons moving slowly, almost deliberately, as if they have places to be. Imagine watching them from a field thousands of years ago, long before telescopes, before cities, before maps, and realizing that some of those lights are not stars at all. They are travelers. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Tonight we're not staying in the present. We're going very far back. So far that even the world beneath our feet will seem unfamiliar. Now let's turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's enjoy tonight's journey. It's a night in a world older than your oldest story. The air smells of wet soil and wild grass. The nearest settlement is a cluster of reed huts by the river, their walls glowing faintly with the ember light of cooking fires. And above the sky is far busier than the one you know. Not with planes, not with satellites, but with wandering lights, bright, steady, and unlike any star's flicker. They cross from horizon to horizon in silence, steady arcs that never break. You can't hear their engines, not over the frogs by the water, not over the wind, but you can feel in your bones that they are machines. In this time, no one calls them ships. The word doesn't exist yet. They are the sky wanderers, the burning paths, the silent herds to the people who watch them. Some vanish behind the curve of the world, others dip low as if grazing along the clouds, and sometimes, just sometimes, one will pause, a tiny frozen sun hovering above a far hill before fading into nothingness. You picture yourself there lying on your back in the grass, feeling the cool earth against your skin. Your eyes adjust to the darkness until every constellation feels close enough to touch. There's Orion, though no one calls it that, yet it's just the shape of a hunter, a reminder of food and survival. But tonight, Orion has company, a single point of light moving straight through his belt, ignoring the lines your mind has drawn between the stars. The elders notice, of course. They tell stories about it, weaving them into the same fabric as tales of the flood, the birth of the mountains, the great beasts that roamed before men. Some say the lights are gods traveling between realms. Others whisper they are people like us, only from farther away than anyone can walk. And in their voices there's no fear, only wonder, because in this world, the line between earth and sky is still negotiable. A major shift is already unfolding. Without telescopes, without written records, these early people are mapping the heavens, the way they map rivers by memory, by repetition, by sitting night after night and watching patterns. Over years, the watchers begin to notice that some stars have schedules. They come in from the east during the spring, vanish in the summer, reappear in autumn. One bright wanderer appears every 13 winters like clockwork. And no, it's not a comet. It moves too evenly, too slowly, like a lantern held by a steady hand. Here's a curious thing: in some river valley halfway across the continent, a different tribe is carving identical patterns into the sides of cliffs, markings that match the flight paths of these sky wanderers. No contact exists between the two peoples, but their charts align perfectly. This is one of those oddities that makes modern historians tilt their heads, wondering if chance alone can explain it. And somewhere far above this ancient earth, there is indeed traffic ships gliding between worlds, their hulls smooth and unbroken, their lights steady, like fireflies that forgot how to blink. They're not here to conquer. They're not here to hide, either. They simply pass a part of the scenery of this older sky, and maybe sometimes they look down, curious about the little shapes gathering around campfires far below. The grass whispers as you shift onto your side, eyes heavy now. You imagine that perhaps some of these travelers carry people who look like you, or perhaps who looked like your ancestors many thousands of years ago. And maybe, just maybe, one day a ship will descend low enough that the stories told in the flicker of firelight will be replaced with memories, real, tangible, unforgettable of the night. The sky itself reached down to meet the earth. The grasslands fade into rolling hills and the season shifts. In this ancient world, you can tell the time of year by the bite of the wind and the smell of the rain. The campfires are burning brighter now, more for warmth than for cooking. And above the sky is still alive with movement. Some ships streaking far in the distance, others taking slow, deliberate paths, as if following trails you cannot see. Before there were maps, there were star charts. Not the kind drawn in ink and kept in libraries, but ones etched into memory, sung into chants, traced with a fingertip on the hide of an animal by a fire. And these charts, they don't just track the constellations we know today. They include lines that cut across them strange arcs, that end nowhere, looping trails that match the strange travelers overhead. Some of the people here are navigators. Not sailors, not yet, but watchers of the heavens. To them, the stars are not just a backdrop. They are waypoints, markers on routes so old they feel eternal. They learn which moving lights appear after a certain moon, which ones shift color before they vanish, which ones are never seen in the same place twice. They are reading traffic patterns in a sky most of us today think is empty. Imagine lying on a rocky outcrop with one of these navigators. They speak softly, as if the sky might overhear, pointing to the east, where a faint, steady glow emerges just above the horizon. That one, they might say in their own tongue, will follow the river star until the snow melts, then disappear into the cave of the sky. You don't need to know the language to understand the meaning. This is a timetable, a prediction, an ancient flight schedule written not on paper, but on the endless canvas above. And here's the strange part: in clay fragments unearthed thousands of years later, those same patterns reappear, carved with a precision modern astronomers recognize. The arcs match exactly to what we'd expect if someone was charting the motion of objects in orbit. Centuries before the first known civilizations began their recorded astronomy. Of course, in this world, the navigators do more than just watch. They use these sky routes as guides for their own travels on Earth. Traders moving across deserts time their journeys by the passing of certain lights overhead. Riverfolk begin long voyages when the lantern star first appears in the north, believing it will protect them from storms. And in the deep winter, when food is scarce, whole communities gather to watch for the hearth flame, a reddish glow that drifts across the heavens once every 2 years. They claim it brings warmth in its wake, and perhaps in some strange, unseen way, it does. You can almost picture it, a world where space travel is so normal for someone else, someone out there, that their movements become part of human navigation. You might even joke quietly to yourself that this is the first public transport schedule in history. Only the buses are enormous ships, and the roads are made of starlight. It's tempting to wonder if these ships could be seen so clearly. Did any of them ever land? Perhaps only in the remotest places where the watchers were few and the land was open. Picture a high desert plateau lit silver under a full moon when suddenly a shadow cuts across the sand. There is no sound, but the air tastes faintly metallic, and the ground seems to hum. A light spreads outward from a point on the horizon, and then nothing. Just the cold night, and the memory of something that didn't belong. In the deep silence after such a sighting, a navigator might mark a new line on their mental map, a point where a traveler stopped instead of passing through. And over time, these resting points could form a network, a hidden map of places not just important to Earth, but important to whatever worlds those ships called home. The wind picks up now, rattling the dried seed pods in the tall grass. Somewhere far below, a river sighs against its banks. The navigator leans back beside you, watching the same slow-moving glow overhead, and you both know without words that it will be back. Not tonight, not next moon, but in its own time, in its own season, it will return, tracing the same arc across the quiet, ancient sky. The seasons turn again, and the air grows warmer. Rain has washed the hills clean, the rivers are swollen with meltwater, and the nights feel softer, the air thick with the scent of blooming plants. Beneath this ancient sky, the watchers gather, not just to track the moving lights, but to celebrate them. In this world, the lines between survival and ceremony are thin, and so are the lines between earthbound life and the stars, stone bronze, and starlight engines. The age you're walking through is one of transition. People are still shaping tools from flint and bronze, but their hands calloused and clever are also building things meant to last for centuries. Tall standing stones that catch the first light of dawn on certain days of the year. Hollow chambers that seem to sing when the wind comes from the right direction. And in this imagined past, some of these structures serve another purpose entirely. They are markers, signals, perhaps even gateways for those who travel the void. Picture this, a great circular platform carved from a single sheet of basalt, its surface so smooth it reflects the stars above. At the center, a shallow depression lined with a metal no one today can identify a metal that does not rust, tarnish, or melt in fire. During the summer solstice, a beam of light from a passing ship glances off the platform in a perfect angle, as if acknowledging the presence of the people below. Whether it's a greeting, a measurement, or a test is unknown. What's certain is that the watchers mark the date, carve it into their stone calendars, and await the next alignment. Here's an unusual fact in some ancient copper mines, ones you can still visit in the present day. There are layers of metal that seem to have been removed with heat, far beyond what any known ancient furnace could produce. Some researchers today scratch their heads at it. Others quietly note that the melting point matches the exhaust temperatures of modern rocketry. And in our scenario tonight, it's not hard to imagine why. If space travel was part of this ancient world, mining would not just serve the villages, it would supply the wanderers above. In this older Earth technology looks different. A ship's engine, when described in a fireside story, might sound like a mythic beast's heart glowing and beating with light. A docking mechanism might be spoken of as a stone that swallows a mouth in the mountain that opens only for the sky travelers. And in some parts of the world, children learn to carve miniature versions of these ships from clay, giving them as offerings in small rock circles so the gods of the road above will keep passing safely. The people here do not think of themselves as primitive. Why would they? They have everything they need to survive, and a deep understanding of the patterns that guide their lives. They know that to move between stars is a long journey, and that the ships they see may take many years to return. They also know, or at least believe, that some among them have already gone up there, chosen for reasons no one can quite explain. And maybe they're right. Maybe somewhere far above this blooming Earth, there are small groups of humans walking under alien suns, breathing air that smells faintly of minerals they have no name for. They would carry with them not steel or glass, but bronze knives, leather packs, and memory maps of rivers and hills that now lie light years away. In the quiet hours of the night, you picture one of those ships, not a sleek silver dart like modern films, but a layered, almost architectural vessel. Its hull is a patchwork of metals and carved panels, some etched with the same symbols found on Earth's megaliths. Inside, the hum of its engines feels like the low note of a drum, steady and hypnotic. And somewhere in a corner, there's a clay charm hanging from a cord, a tiny gift from a village far below, carried into the stars as a reminder of home. On the ground, the watchers see the ship pass again, just a sliver of light against the infinite dark. They have no way of knowing where it's been or what worlds it has touched, but they know it's moving with purpose, and they feel deep in their bones that they are part of something much larger, older, and stranger than themselves. The fire beside you has burned low now. Sparks drift upward, vanishing into the same night that holds the ships. The air is warm, your eyelids heavy, and the ancient sky above hums with life, not loud, not rushed, but steady, as if it has all the time in the world. You rise before dawn, when the stars are paling, and the horizon is a thin line of slate. The air smells like dust and cold stone. In this unified world of old routines and older skies, you begin to notice the ground has been speaking to the heavens for a very long time, in terraces, in lines, in circles that catch the sun, the way cupped hands catch water. The launch sites are not marked by neon signs or hazard tape. They're hiding in plain sight, wearing the costumes of temples and tombs, pretending to be patient piles of rock while they wait for their next appointment with the sky. Across the vast land of Pangaea, or rather across the continents that once remembered Pangaea, you wander to a plateau hemmed by desert. Here stands a geometry so certain it feels inevitable, a pyramid whose edges slice morning light with the precision of a blade. Once its skin was smooth casing stone, Tura limestone polished so bright the structure would have gleamed like a small artificial sunrise. That's your unusual fact for tonight. The Great Pyramid wasn't always a rugged staircase. It was once a mirror for the day. In our imagined history, that mirror served more than ritual. It flashed signals, a heliograph to the heavens, a "we're home. You can find us." A major historical event anchors you around 2560 BCE. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is completed. In our gentle speculation, its interior passages double as resonant guides, channels that hum at frequencies tuned to the Sky Wanderer's instruments. You run your fingertips along cool stone and feel a low thrumming note, the kind that sits at the edge of hearing more a pressure than a sound, like the purr of some enormous sleeping creature. If you grin and think, so it's basically ancient Wi-Fi but with rocks, well, you wouldn't be the first to make that joke tonight. Far away, fog clings to a ring of stones. The grass is damp. Your boots make a sound like tearing silk. On the longest day, a razor of sunlight threads between uprights and lands on a marked spot, as if guided by an invisible hand. This place feels like a calendar, and it is but also like a runway beacon. In our story, these stones are the language of arrival. The solstice alignment at Stonehenge becomes a handshake protocol, a timing cue for descent, a whisper to the sky that the runway is clear. Whether anyone ever needed such cues is a mystery, but it changes the way you look at lintels and trilithons. They stop being just prehistoric architecture and become for a moment a lit path for footfalls that never leave footprints. You travel to a high desert where the ground itself is a drawing board. Lines run for kilometers straight as an oath-carving hummingbird and spider into the skin of Earth. They make the most sense from above, which is either a strange coincidence or a very polite invitation. You stand on a low slope and trace a wing, with your eyes feeling the sun warm the back of your neck. Maybe these were prayers, maybe road signs, maybe both. The modern thought that slips in. These are the original "exit here for services" signs, makes you chuckle softly, and the wind promptly steals the sound away. Mountains are launch pads too, if you squint at them long enough. There's a plateau whose air tastes thin and mineral, where thunder feels closer to your spine. Here stepped terraces act like a stairway for clouds. In our imagined past, a ship descends to thin air with less strain, and a mountain is the best handshake Earth can offer. The stonework clings to the slopes with a determination that feels like faith. You walk its edges and realize the builders weren't just honoring peaks, they were collaborating with altitude. Not all sites point up with light. Some sing. In dark chambers sunk beneath the world, voices bloom into resonance at specific pitches. Archaeologists will someday measure these rooms and note a peak around the low hum of 110 Hz, the kind of tone that settles in your chest like a patient drum. In our scenario, those frequencies aren't just spiritual, they're practical, a tonal lighthouse that helps a craft's instruments cross-check position when the sun is veiled and the stars are shy. You murmur a note, and the room answers a warm-held chord that seems to tidy your thoughts. You can almost believe a ship above answers too, the way a whale turns its head to hear a distant echo. It isn't only giants of stone. Modest mounds in marshland wink to the sky with fire, long rows of torches smoldering with oils that burn without smoke. Reed barges drift through black water, carrying small braziers like portable constellations. Someone carefully, lovingly tends these flames. Night shift, you think, honoring their quiet work. Best uniform, warm cloak, good boots, lots of snacks. The idea of launch crews in wool and linen is surprisingly comforting. In this world, spaceport personnel smell like peat smoke and river mud, and they bring bread still warm from the coals. A wind picks up, and with it a memory, a rumor of a site no one has ever found, a perfect circle of black glass fused into a mesa, as if lightning fell and never left. In our story, this is a blast pad in slow motion, a patch of melted sand from engines that burned blue-white, and then were gone. Modern visitors would call it fulgurite on a grand scale. The ancients might have called it a place where the sky kissed the earth too hard. You toe the edge of the glass and see your reflection scalloped by ripples. You look like a traveler paused between steps. We move you and I among these places with a calm curiosity that keeps the heart steady. The repetition helps in this unified world. Stones line up with suns. Mountains lend their shoulders to the airlines make sense only to a watcher who can fly. Every site is two things at once, a human hearth and a cosmic address. You half expect to find the equivalent of a baggage claim, somewhere lost amphorae, circling endlessly, and then remind yourself that jokes are lighter at night because gravity seems to nap after dark. A truth drifts in quietly whether or not ships ever used these sites. The builders used the sky. That's the historical heart beating beneath the story. The completion of the Great Pyramid. The solstice blade at Stonehenge. The desert geoglyphs that read like a book only an eagle can open. The scientific spirit here is practical and patient. Measure, mark, repeat. Even if no one ever landed, the launch window lived in their bones. The ground rehearsed a dialogue with the heavens until the heavens felt like a neighbor. By the time the sun edges up, the stones have turned the color of warm bread. You brush grit from your hands and realize that these places have done their job. They've stitched earth to sky in a way you can feel in your feet. And somewhere above, maybe just beyond the blue, something old and patient notes the alignment marks the time and keeps moving, as if a meeting has been scheduled for a day you haven't learned to name yet. Dawn slips into day, and the stones cool to the color of ash. Paths stretch away from the monuments, like threads from a loom, pulling you toward places where good stories and starlight quietly change hands. In this unified world, trade is simply how distant hearts stay in touch. And in a world where the sky is busy, markets don't end at the harbor. They continue upward, as if the stalls just keep climbing until they reach thin air. You arrive at a riverside landing where baskets smell of cinnamon and wet rope. The dock groans gently as boats bump and settle, and somewhere a pot of grain pops like tiny fireworks. Traders lean over amphorae, listening for the soft glug that means the seal held. Their hands move with that careful speed you see in people who've counted to 100 slowly, without losing their place. Across the vast land of roots that once remembered Pangaea, the same motions repeat: sling a bale, weigh a jar, mark a ledger. But here there's an extra step. Eyes lift to the sky between loads, gauging the pale daytime path of a traveler that will pass after sunset, a reminder that the market has an upstairs. A major scientific historical event anchors the morning. The discovery and systematic use of the Indian Ocean monsoon wins the knowledge attributed in later sources to a navigator sometimes called Hippolus in the 1st century BCE. It's simple and profound. Learn the rhythm of seasonal winds, and entire civilizations can trade on schedule. In our story, the same principle carries outward. Someone learned the monsoons of the sky, the predictable windows when a ship can fall. Sunward, or climb outward with the least resistance. A timetable is born, and with it timetable's best friends, shopping lists. You wander a market lane where spices run like a gradient earthy cumin, citrus bright, coriander pepper that nips the inside of your nose so playfully you have to pretend you didn't just sneeze. A woman taps a clay seal and the amphora answers with a hollow note. She nods, satisfied, and adds the jar to a stack destined not for the next city, but for a staging site in the hills. From there on, a lucky night, a cargo climbs. Peppercorns that once made emperors take notes become stowaways among the stars. Trade turns luxuries into habits, and habits into culture. Imagine textiles with dyes that seem to drink light and exhale color woven on looms that creak like pleasant old houses. Imagine resins that burn with the calm scent of forests after rain. Imagine metal ingots stamped with marks no modern mint can match. A random unusual fact whispers in on Earth cowrie shells once served as money across wide regions for centuries. In our imagined upstairs market, maybe a particular shell, spiraled cream, with a soft freckle pattern, becomes a ticket to freight space on a passing hull. You slide one into your pouch and feel the smoothness, thinking it's the first boarding pass that could survive a swim. Overhead, there's etiquette. Ships don't drop into any sky. They prefer quiet valleys where air pools or plateaus, where winds are tame. On certain nights, the market lights dim as a hush passes through the crowd. Children are lifted onto shoulders. The world holds its breath. You feel a pressure in your ears the way you do at the lip of a cave. Then a slow glow brushes the hills, the color of banked coals, and something very old and very new lowers out of the dark, as gently as a moth finds a flower. No fanfare, no thunder, just the tidy exchange of bundles and a few bright nods, as if everyone's meeting eyes over a shared joke. Down at the water, an old boatman tells you about a shipwreck from long ago, the way amphorae keep secrets in the deep. In our world, a vessel like the Uluburun ship sank off what is now Turkey in the late Bronze Age, carrying copper and tin in quantities that make modern divers whisper. In tonight's gentle speculation, a similar cargo once rose, instead of fell. 10 tons of copper that smelled faintly like rain, bound for a workshop where hulls get patched and instruments fed. Copper becomes a chorus, bells for temples, wires for engines, bracelets that remember wrists. You touch a bracelet on a stall, and it's warm from the sun. You can't help checking if it hums back. Trade bends language. Words learn to be convenient. A Phoenician scribble becomes a road that writing can walk, then a ladder that laws and invoices climb. A merchant in linen counts on her fingers the same way a mechanic in a mountain hanger will count later. Thumb touching each knuckle, as if the hand remembers its abacus. 2 for the road, 1 for luck, and 1 for when luck pretends it's busy. You smile, and the ledger smiles back numbers that feel like the quiet tick of a well-made clock. Markets also move ideas the way rivers move silt. A medicinal route travels with a story about when to harvest by moonlight. A method for glazing pottery crosses a strait, rides a caravan, and one day hardens into tiles that line a floor where low gravity makes your steps feel like polite hops. In this unified world, every object has 2 journeys, the one you can trace on a map, and the one it takes inside the mind that learns to use it. You pause at a stall selling dried fruit pressed into tidy bricks, each stamped with a seal that looks like a dancing bird. Sweetness concentrates. Time slows inside sugar. That's your unusual fact's cousin. In many places, tea and salt once functioned as money compact and preservable, like thought in a jar. Up there somewhere, someone unwraps a brick stamped with the same bird and shares it across a cramped table under an alien sky that smells like cold iron and pine. You can hear the quiet laughter the way travelers always laugh when food tastes like home and gravity has forgotten to be strict for a moment. Not every deal is noble. In narrow alleys, weights sit a hair too light and palms are anxious. A broker offers to insure a caravan against dragons, which is a very marketable phrase for sandstorms and bandits. You nearly ask if the policy covers meteors, and then decide to keep that joke for later, slipping it into your pocket, like a coin with a hole drilled through. Markets are funny that way. You start with pepper, and end with stories you can spend. By midday, a gong sounds from the hill. The wind shifts. Stalls begin to pack, not because the day is done, but because the window is opening. The upstairs route will be clear tonight, and those who have paid in shells and copper and favors will see their goods vanish into the thin singing air. You feel it too, an ache that is not fear and not hunger, a wanting to watch something rise and become smaller until it's only a promise among the stars. The scientific heart keeps beating beneath the hush. Just as the monsoon maps turned ocean travel into a clock, you could set orbital paths, have become schedules that even a market can memorize. Launch when the angle is kind. Land when the crosswind sleeps. Time the burn to the whisper of a certain star. It sounds like poetry, because science often does when it has good manners. Evening slides down the hills like silk. Lanterns are trimmed low. Children clutch bundles of dates and sesame to their chests. A soft roar approaches as polite as a tide. You lift your eyes, and there it is, the upstairs stall, the night counter, the merchant that never haggles. Ropes are not thrown, ladders are not dropped. Instead, gravity is persuaded to be gentle for a minute, and cargo glides into a mouth of light. Receipts tonight are simple: a nod, a hand to the heart, a shell pressed to the palm, a lesson learned for the next timetable. When the glow fades, the market exhales. Someone laughs at nothing in particular. Someone else starts a pot of lentils, which honestly smell better than philosophy. You stand a while longer, letting the quiet wrap around you, like a shawl. In this unified world, trade is a lullaby sung in waits, and measures in winds and windows in ships that pass like patient stars, and leave behind the softest kind of wealth, the feeling that far places are not so far after all. Night returns, but this time the air is cooler, tinged with the faint salt of a distant coast. You follow the scent and the sound of waves until you find a small harbor where the masts sway like a thicket of reeds in the wind. There is music here, not the kind from strings or drums, but the quiet, repetitive music of work rope against wood grain, sliding into sacks, the low rumble of voices that know each other well. And on one weathered dock, something unusual is being loaded crates sealed not with nails, but with a paste of clay and resin designed to keep out moisture for months. The food that could cross the void is not a matter of luxury here. It is a matter of life. These are not the quick meals of a day's fishing trip, but carefully chosen stores meant to survive journeys that might stretch across seasons. You see flat cakes of grain mixed with honey, thick and dense, their sweetness locked away, like sunlight in amber. Clay jars are lined with fat and stuffed with dried meat layered so tightly that air can't find its way in. And there, the most precious of all small bundles of dried herbs wrapped in linen, not for flavor, but for health, because even in this imagined ancient sky-faring world, scurvy is still a very bad travel companion. A major historical thread hums under your feet the provisioning of long-distance voyages in the ancient world, like the Egyptian expeditions to Punt in the 2nd millennium BCE. In reality, those ships carried bread, beer, dried fish, and onions to keep sailors alive. In our story, that same provisioning logic stretches into the stars. A launch might leave with 40 jars of grain, 10 of salted fish, 5 of something sweet because sweet is good for morale when the days feel endless. You smile thinking about how the first interstellar cookbook might have read more like a survival guide. In the corner of the dock, a man in a wool cloak sits cross-legged with a flat stone in his lap, grinding dried chickpeas into powder. He adds salt folds in sesame oil and shapes the mixture into small discs before placing them on a tray to dry in the sun. Travel bread, someone calls it. You take one bite and find it dry, but satisfying, the kind of food that feels heavier after you swallow, as though it's reminding you it's there to keep you alive, not win any flavor contests. The thought makes you chuckle softly. An unusual fact slips in some ancient seafaring cultures like the Polynesians. Voyagers carried sprouted coconuts and even living pigs on canoes, ensuring fresh food mid-journey. In our scenario, perhaps small animals, rabbits, goats, hardy fowl, are carried aboard the ships, kept calm in straw-lined pens. The thought of a goat gently floating down a zero-gravity corridor is enough to make you grin, and immediately try not to imagine the mess. It's not all about sustenance, it's also about the comfort of familiar tastes. A jar of spiced wine sealed so tight it could survive the jostle of launch. A pouch of roasted barley to chew during long watches. Dried figs that burst with a tiny echo of summer, even in the cold dark between worlds. The people here know that food is memory, and memory is a survival tool just as essential as the grain stores. When a sailor or a skyfarer opens a jar and inhales the scent of home, the voyage becomes bearable. You watch as the crates are marked with simple symbols: a sun for grains, a fish for dried meat, a spiral for sweets, a crescent for herbs. The markings are quick to paint and easy to understand, no matter the language. Later, in the dim light of a ship's hold, these signs will guide tired hands to the right meal without anyone having to ask. It's a reminder that even in the vast complexity of space, there's room for simplicity. Farther along the dock, a group is preparing something different. Not food to eat, but food to grow. Small clay pots are filled with dark, damp soil, each holding a cluster of seeds. In our imagined world, some ships carry their own small gardens, tended in quiet corners, where water drips in a slow, measured rhythm. The plants may never see the full sun again, but under the glow of steady lamps, they'll reach toward the light, giving leaves and roots in return for the care they're shown. It's an exchange as old as life itself. A sudden hush falls over the dock as the tide reaches its turning point. Ropes are untied, and the cargo begins its slow journey inland toward the high plateau launch site. You join the caravan walking behind a cart piled high with jars wrapped in woven mats. Each step is deliberate. Nothing here is rushed. Even the wind seems to know this is food, for more than just bodies. It's for minds, for the thread of connection between this small blue world and whatever waits beyond it. When you reach the plateau, the night is deep and velvet black. The stars lean in close, and for a moment you feel the same anticipation that must have filled the air before the first human ship ever left Earth. Workers move quietly, stowing the crates into compartments that seem impossibly snug, as if the ship has known these measurements for centuries. A small boy hands you a pouch of dates as you stand watching. You take one taste, the sticky sweetness, and think this is a gift that will taste exactly the same under another sun. The hum begins low, so low, you wonder if it's just the blood in your ears. The ground underfoot trembles gently like a sleeping giant, shifting. Somewhere inside the ship, herbs are packed tight. Bread is stacked neatly, and jars rest in the darkness, ready to feed lives that will soon be floating above the world. You realize with a kind of quiet amusement that somewhere in the infinite future, someone might take a bite of this bread chew and think it's a bit dry, but it'll do. The hum deepens. A slow light blooms under the hull as warm and steady as an oven door opening. The air smells faintly metallic now, mingled with the ghost of spices from the cargo. You step back, the pouch of dates still in your hand, and watch as the ship rises, taking with it the oldest kind of human gift, the sharing of food into the newest kind of human journey. The ship has long since vanished into the black, but the stories it carries will linger. By the next night, the dockside fires burn lower, their smoke curling into the stars. You drift away from the harbor and back inland, following an older road, one that exists not in stone or dirt, but in the imagination. In this unified world, travel isn't just a physical act. It's a seed planted in the mind, nurtured by words, and watered by the shared glow of the hearth. Tonight, those words are about places far beyond the moon. Stories told under alien skies have a way of shaping the people who hear them. In villages tucked into mountain valleys, elders speak of suns that rise in colors the human eye can't name, of rivers that run thick and slow under double moons of trees, with leaves that hum when touched by wind. They lean forward as they tell it, letting the firelight flicker across their faces, and the children lean forward too, eyes wide, not yet knowing that the places they're hearing about might be real. A major historical heartbeat hums beneath these tales, the oral traditions that carried knowledge long before writing traditions, like the Dreamtime stories of indigenous Australians or Polynesian navigation chants mapping thousands of miles of ocean. In our imagined history, the same method preserves maps of the stars and descriptions of worlds visited in the age when humans traveled space in ancient times. Every listener becomes a living archive, storing the coordinates in memory, passing them to the next voice and the next. You sit by one such fire, now knees drawn up, listening to an elder describe the sky pastures, where slow-moving clouds cast shadows on the ground of a planet so vast it takes weeks to cross a single meadow. His words are slow and steady, each one dropping into the silence like a pebble, into deep water. At first you think he's speaking in pure poetry. Then you catch the pattern landmarks, directions, changes in the wind. It's not just a story, it's a travel log. And here's your unusual fact for tonight. Some Aboriginal star maps were essentially mnemonic devices embedding real geography into constellations, so travelers could navigate overland. In our scenario, the same principle works for space. A certain triangle of stars might guide a ship to a world with ice rings. A crooked ladder in the sky might point toward a desert planet where red winds scrape the stone. To remember the path is to keep the door open even if you never walk through it again. The fire crackles. Shadows lean against the walls of the roundhouse. Someone brings out a carved mask, its surface painted in ochre and soot, its eyes shaped like elongated teardrops. This, the elder explains, is the face of the tidewalkers. People who live on a world where water rises so high that they climb into the sky to escape it, returning only when the sea sleeps. The children giggle. The idea is strange but funny, until the elder points upward toward a faint, moving light. The giggles fade to silence. You can feel it too, the subtle shift when a story stops being a distant dream and starts feeling like a memory. The listener's heart leans forward, and the storyteller's voice softens. He describes how the air on another world tastes faintly sweet, how the grass is pale and almost transparent, how footsteps there sound like tapping glass. It's too specific to be pure invention. You wonder if his grandmother, or her grandmother, once stood on such a world and brought the description back in her voice. One of the younger storytellers picks up the thread, adding a playful flourish. On that same world, they say, the birds are terrible gossips, always talking about the visitors. He flaps his arms in imitation, making the little ones laugh so hard they nearly tip over. Even in the grandest legends, there's room for a little silliness. It keeps the memory warm. Later, away from the fire, you hear a song rising from a nearby hut. It's not in any language you know, but the melody feels old and patient. The chorus repeats a rising and falling note pattern like a gentle rocking. A random thought drifts in. Maybe this is how space travel first felt to its passengers, not like rushing forward, but like being rocked to sleep by the universe itself. When the song ends, the night deepens. You look up and see two faint lines of light moving slowly toward each other. They don't meet, not this time, but the space between them glows faintly for a moment, before fading. Someone beside you says it's just the star bridge being tested. You ask, tested for what? And they grin. For stories. The reply is so earnest that you can't help but laugh, even though the idea makes a kind of quiet sense. The thing about stories told under alien skies is that they work in two directions. They carry the far places into the present moment, but they also plant seeds for future journeys. The children who fall asleep tonight with images of sky pastures and glass-footed grass may one day stand on the hills themselves. The stars overhead are both the ceiling of their world and the floor of someone else's. As you drift toward sleep yourself, the elder's voice lingers steady, warm, and threaded with the strange conviction that the sky is not something you look at. It's something you can walk into as easily as stepping through the smoke of a dying fire. The road brings you back to the village, and the village has changed in the way places do when the air is carrying a rumor. Doors stay half open. Fires are banked, but not bright. People glance toward the ridge path, as if watching for weather. In this unified world, news travels on expressions before it ever finds words. Someone has returned. You feel it before you see it, that small stillness in the crowd where attention narrows. The traveler steps out of the dusk, wrapped in a cloak that looks ordinary, until the wind shifts and the fabric flashes with a sheen you can't name. The gait is the first odd thing. It's careful measured, almost rehearsed, like someone relearning gravity in public. A hand reaches to steady the traveler, and they laugh softly, apologizing to the ground for being a little late to its rules. The strange return always begins with the body. In lower gravity, muscles forget urgency. Bones give up small arguments with weight. The inner ear teaches a different kind of balance. Back here, the weight of the air itself feels busy. The traveler breathes more deeply than seems necessary, as if reintroducing the chest to pressure. The face looks both older and younger, tired around the eyes, bright in the set of the mouth. Someone offers bread, someone else offers a stool. The stool wins. A major scientific historical event folds into the scene like a hand into a glove. July 1969, the Apollo 11 crew lands on Earth and is whisked into quarantine inside the Mobile Quarantine Facility, an Airstream trailer turned into a tiny, rolling biosafety lab. In our gentle speculation, your village knows the instinct already. They have a house for returners, a sunny room, a low bed, a basin of warm water scented with herbs and rules that sound like kindness, rest first, talk later. Eat simple, breathe slow. Quarantine becomes hospitality with good manners. You stand in the doorway and feel grateful that someone made a habit of welcome. Inside the light is Honeysoft. The traveler holds a cup with two hands because the hands have been busy doing other things for too long. The cup sweats, and the scent of the herbs lifts mint and something like pine. A child peeks in and asks the only question that matters. Did you see it? The traveler smiles. I saw many its. That answer earns a stern look from a grandmother who knows how to ration wonder. One at a time, she says, and sets a bowl of stew on the table. There's laughter now, cautious at first. The traveler explains the wobble in their step after months of floating. The vestibular system sulks like a cat moved off a warm windowsill. You picture the organs of balance stamping tiny feet and filing a complaint with the Department of Gravity. The village healer listens, nodding the way healers do when a story is both new and exactly what they expected. Salt for cramps. Time for bones. Walk on soft ground. Sleep when the sun says sleep, even if your body swears midnight smells like breakfast. An unusual fact arrives like a silver fish in shallow water. In microgravity, spines lengthen, and astronauts can become a little taller. Sometimes a couple of centimeters, until gravity's steady hand presses the vertebrae back together. The traveler laughs when the tailor insists on remeasuring for a cloak. It's just my borrowed height, they say. The tailor taps the chalk thoughtfully. Then I'll hem for both sizes, they reply the way practical people make room for miracles. In this room, the senses reset. Bread tastes improbably good. The breeze through the door feels like a visit from an old friend. The traveler's hands nicked with small cuts that look like constellations hold objects, as if each one might drift away. A spoon gets set down, and out of habit, the traveler waits to see if it floats. Everyone grins when it stubbornly refuses. Local gravity, the elder says, deadpan, very clingy. Across the vast land of places that once remembered Pangaea, the pattern repeats. Returns require rituals. On an island coast, returners sleep in hammocks for a week, teaching the body that sway is now optional. In a mountain town, they walk barefoot in cold streams at dawn, persuading feet to trust the ground with each patient step. In a river settlement, they share 3 quiet meals before telling one loud story, a reminder that wonder should be marinated, not microwaved. You realize these customs are science, with a blanket recovery protocols wrapped in comfort. The traveler says little about the far places at first. A word here, thin blue. A word there, ringed silver. When the room hums with readiness, more arrives. There was a planet where the wind played reeds until the valleys sang like flutes. There was a moon whose ground felt springy as if walking on bread. There was a station, a wayhouse where the water tasted faintly metallic like rain from a copper roof. You can smell those places through the words like seeing steam and knowing tea is near. Some things they don't say. Not because those things are terrible, but because they are private. The way sleep sounds when silence has no insects, no leaves, no distant bark of a dog. The way loneliness arrives precise and polite, and leaves a folded note that says, "Drink water. Write home." The way another traveler's laugh can travel the length of a ship and make an hour behave. Those are stories for later, for one friend on a walk for a new watcher under a familiar sky. The village does what villages do best. It absorbs the strangeness, metabolizes it, and returns it as normal life with better recipes. The baker experiments with lighter loaves for tired jaws. The potter makes cups with wide handles for hands that forgot friction. The storyteller updates a chant so the stars in the verse match the traveler's corrected map. In this unified world, return is not an ending. It's a hinge. The door swings both ways more smoothly now. Night thins toward dawn. The traveler sleeps at last, spine unkinking grain by grain, the body remembering the old gravity with a sigh. Outside, someone places a smooth stone on the threshold. A local custom, meaning you came back. May you stay as long as you need. May you go when you're ready. You touch the stone and feel heat from the last of the day stored inside it. A small battery of sunlight doing its gentle work. At first light, the village will wake to ordinary tasks, mending nets, sorting grain, teasing knots from rope, and one extraordinary one listening. Slowly, carefully, the far places will be braided into the near, and the traveler will no longer be strange. They will just be someone who went, and then came home carrying in their pockets a few new ways to be human. Morning comes with a restless wind that smells faintly of rain. The traveler still sleeps in the quiet room, but the village is already stirring. Down near the reed beds, fishermen are mending their nets, and on the far side of the square, a cluster of children chase a chicken that has escaped its pen. Life folds around the extraordinary, letting it rest. But in the spaces between ordinary work, the stories begin to change shape. They shift focus from the human travelers to something stranger creatures that the elders say were never from here to begin with. Animals that were never from here have a different kind of presence in these tales. They are described with care, their habits remembered as clearly as any human skill. One is a bird, the size of a man's forearm, with feathers so pale they shimmer like ice in moonlight. Another is a lizard, whose scales carry a faint glow pulsing softly when it sleeps. And there is always at least one creature that looks almost familiar, a cousin to something you know, but with just enough difference to unsettle you. The major historical thread beneath this idea comes from an unlikely source, the Columbian Exchange after 1492, when plants and animals crossed oceans and permanently changed ecosystems. Horses returned to the Americas. Potatoes and maize traveled to Europe, Africa, and Asia. In our imagined past, something similar has happened on a far older, larger scale. Instead of ships crossing seas, they crossed the void. Instead of centuries, the changes took root in millennia. An unusual fact adds a spark. DNA evidence suggests that certain species like the sweet potato may have made their way across oceans thousands of years before Columbus, perhaps carried by humans, or possibly even by ocean drift. In our scenario, perhaps some ancient spacefaring travelers brought small, hardy life forms from other worlds, releasing them here for trade companionship or by accident. In the village, one story in particular comes up again and again about the moonfruit trees. They grow tall and thin, with silvery bark that flakes in perfect circles, as if the tree is shedding tiny coins. The fruit, pale green and faintly luminous, is said to taste like a mix of pear and mint, and to leave a cool tingle in the mouth. Elders claim the trees are not native to Earth. They first sprouted in the shadow of a long-ago landing site. Whether or not that's true, their groves are always found near places where the ground holds unusual stones. You sit with one of the old gardeners who tends these trees. Her hands are stained with green from pruning the soft leaves, and she tells you almost casually that moonfruit seeds won't sprout unless they've been in darkness for exactly 1 year. They miss the deep, she says. The soil here is fine, but they remember a sky without a sun. It's such a poetic thought that you almost miss the practical implication. She's learned how to mimic alien soil conditions using root cellars. Then there are the night moths, small winged things that drink only from a single kind of flower. Their wings flash violet under moonlight, but in daylight they look like scraps of paper. The villagers say they came here in the hold of a returning ship, and now they are part of the seasonal cycle, disappearing in the cold months and reappearing as soon as the moonfruit blooms. You watch one flutter near your hand, light as ash, and it's impossible to tell whether it belongs here or not. The fisherman you met earlier swears that the large silver-backed fish in the river aren't native either. He points to their eyes larger than those of other fish, and the way they leap in precise arcs, almost as if following instructions. You ask him how long they've been here. He shrugs. Long enough to taste good in stew. Even domestic animals carry hints of this possibility. The dogs here are small and nimble, with ears that can swivel nearly all the way around. The cats seem to have an uncanny sense of when a ship will pass overhead, gathering in clusters to watch the sky. No one questions it too much. In this world, familiarity doesn't mean origin. It just means something has found its place. An elder explains it in the simplest way. We've always been trading with the stars. Sometimes we sent things out. Sometimes we got things back. And sometimes what came back had fur or wings or seeds in its pockets. You can't help picturing a ship's cargo hold with a goat tied near the grain sacks, a basket of moonfruit seedlings strapped into place, and a few stray night moths clinging to the ropes. In this unified world, the boundaries of native and foreign blur in the same way the boundaries between here and out there do. Life adapts. The glowing lizards burrow into warm sand. The silver-backed fish leap under familiar constellations. The moonfruit trees shed their coin-shaped bark into the same rivers where human children play. And over time, the origin becomes less important than the fact that it's here now, feeding someone, sheltering something, adding another thread to the tapestry of life on Earth. As you walk back toward the village, the night moths follow in a loose cloud, their wings catching the moonlight. It's a reminder that not everything remarkable announces its arrival. Some things simply take root, grow, and wait for you to notice. And once you do, you realize they've been changing the world quietly for far longer than you thought. By afternoon, the village buzz quiets, and you find yourself in a small room that smells like dust and lemon oil, the kind of place where careful hands keep careful things. On a low table lie objects gathered across years, beads the color of smoke, a blade wrapped in oiled cloth, a lump of metal that looks unremarkable until the light hits it just so. In this unified world, the past likes to whisper through objects, and sometimes it does so in a language made of metals. The missing metals are not always missing in the sense of absent. Sometimes they're missing in the sense of not behaving. A knife refuses to rust after a century in damp soil. A pendant shines with a sheen you can't polish into ordinary copper. A nail bends like lead, but rings like glass when tapped. You tilt your head, listening. The room offers no explanations, only a suggestion. Materials remember where they came from. You unwrap the oiled cloth. The blade beneath it is dark, smooth, and faintly mottled, as if clouds were trapped in the metal. You've held bronze before its warm, almost buttery weight. But this is different. Heavier, cooler on the skin. The edge holds a line the way a river holds a bank. A craftsman once hammered this into obedience, then sent it into a future where people would argue about its birth certificate. A major scientific historical event steps softly into the room in 2016. A study used X-ray fluorescence to confirm that Tutankhamun's famous dagger was forged from meteoritic iron, high in nickel and cobalt iron of the sky, carried down in stones that fell burning. Your fingertips hover above the blade, as if you might feel a meteor's memory. You imagine an ancient smith, eyes narrowed fire reflected as twin suns, melting and welding what most people would have worshipped. In our speculative world, the smith might have had help alloys catalogued by travelers, a recipe sung across generations, instructions like heat until the stone smells sweet, quench when the sparks turn blue. You lean closer to a bead that glints oddly. Its surface shows tiny flow lines, as if the metal were persuaded to behave at a temperature it usually refuses. An unusual fact hums up from memory, centuries before modern chemistry learned to smelt it. Artisans in what's now Colombia and Ecuador sintered platinum grains with gold and copper, creating a workable composite long before furnaces could melt pure platinum. They found a way to coerce a stubborn metal into artistry. In our story, perhaps a visitor once traded a pinch of star sand platinum dust from an impact site, and a goldsmith learned to make it sing with local fire. On another tray lies a disc the size of your palm. At first you think it's bronze, but when you tilt it, a pale, ghostly pink flashes across the surface, a hint of something like brass, only not quite. The label reads orichalcum, a word that in old texts meant a fabled metal, and in later history turned out to be a family of brasses rich in zinc. It's a good reminder that names are often poems, not passports. Still, in this imagined timeline, there are pieces that behave like metaphors until you heat them, and the metaphor refuses to melt. Across the vast land of workshops that once remembered Pangaea, curiosity grows tools, like vines, grow tendrils. You visit a little house where scholars have stolen a trick from the future, a handheld device that breathes light onto metal and reads back the elements by the way they glow, XRF, a method that turns metal into a quiet chorus. The blade sings nickel-cobalt iron, a pattern that matches meteorites. A ring whispers copper and tin ordinary bronze. A lump of pale metal murmurs tungsten in a way that makes everyone frown. Tungsten is stubborn as a mule in a snowstorm, and ancient fires shouldn't bring it to heel. The oldest person in the room clears their throat and says, "Sometimes the world surprises us. Please make tea." A tray of small bars sits to one side, each stamped with a simple mark, 3 lines for copper, 2 dots for tin. A spiral for something no one has quite agreed to name. The spiral bars are heavier than they look, with a faint scent of ozone when rubbed. You tell yourself that metals don't have smells, and then remember that forging has perfumes, coal and clay, hot scale, and oil, a constellation of odors that map to temperatures like mile markers. You never knew you knew this, until your nose told you. You think of another historical heartbeat, this one from Africa, where archaeologists documented sophisticated steel making in the Haya region of Tanzania, some 2 millennia ago, furnaces that preheated air to produce carbon steel with remarkable control. Civilization, it turns out, has many forges. In our stargazing past, a few forges might have learned to tune not just heat and air, but time heating slowly, over 2 harvests cooling for a winter, and a day guarding a secret recipe tighter than a royal seal. The result metals that keep their tempers kindly in the cold, that don't shatter when the night is cruel, that remember the rhythm of engines they were never supposed to meet. You take up a small hammer and tap the edge of a plate. The sound is bright, almost bell-like. Someone smiles and says, "Ring like that, and you've got good grain." In this unified world, grain is not just for bread. It's the texture of metal, the way crystals align, the way strength flows. Ancient smiths read grain the way sailors read waves, and maybe a few read starlight in it too, noting which bars cooled best under a particular phase of the moon, because a ship had passed and kissed the air into stillness. You flip through a ledger of old finds catalogued with new patience. Here is an axe head with nickel content too high for ordinary ore. Here is a cache of pins with uniform micro-holes as if drilled by a tool that didn't wobble. Here is a thin sheet that under magnification shows layers like pastry metal folded and refolded until it could take a polish that survives centuries. None of it proves a visitor leaned against a village doorframe and traded a spool of wire for a sack of grain. None of it disproves it either. What it does prove is older and sturdier, that humans everywhere pushed their fires to the edge of possible and then nudged them a little farther. Night moves in, bringing with it the soft thrum of crickets and the dry whisper of paper in your hands. You set the blade back in its cloth and feel the weight leave your palms. Objects like travelers need rest. The room settles. Somewhere outside, a child laughs, the kind of laugh that turns into a hiccup, then a yawn. In the hush, you imagine a workshop under a different sky, lit by lamps that burn without smoke, a bench scattered with familiar tools and one or two that aren't. A smith there lifts a piece of our metal and listens the same way you did. The note rings true. Two worlds agree on the pitch. In this unified world, metals are more than matter. They're messages folded into shape by heat and intention. Some messages come from the ground beneath your feet. Some arrive blazing from the dark. Some may have been handed over a threshold you can't see anymore, exchanged with a smile and a nod, recorded not in books, but in blades that refuse to rust, and beads that dream in platinum. You leave the room and close the door softly, as if not to wake a sleeping archive. The next morning is cool and still, with a sky so clear it feels like glass stretched overhead. You follow a narrow trail up into the mountains, the air thinning with every step. There's a smell here, clean sharp like snow you can't see yet. The path winds between walls of stone where lichens bloom in slow motion, and somewhere above a thin rhythmic drip echoes against rock. In this unified world, caves aren't just shelters. Sometimes they're vaults, and sometimes they hold something far stranger than grain. The deep freeze vaults are not marked on any map. They exist in shadows that the sun only touches for a few minutes each year, carved into places where cold is not a visitor, but a resident. You come to one now, a narrow entrance half hidden by a spill of boulders where your breath fogs before you step inside. The air is still heavy, with a faint metallic tang. The darkness swallows sound, and your footsteps feel both too loud and too soft at the same time. A major historical heartbeat runs quietly beneath this place, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, built into a Norwegian mountainside to store millions of plant seeds in deep cold insurance against disaster. But in our imagined past, the vaults hold more than seeds. They are cryo-sleep chambers, cut into rock, before iron ever rang on anvils, before wheels rolled across roads. The walls glisten with frost, and along the far side of the chamber shapes lie beneath ice like insects in amber. The first is a vessel, not a ship, but a sarcophagus of sorts, carved from a single block of stone, veined with some glittering mineral. Through a thin panel of ice, you see a smooth surface that catches the faintest light. Beside it is another smaller shaped almost like a cradle. You lean close, and for a moment you imagine the hum of machinery, too subtle to disturb the frost. Here's an unusual fact that makes this place feel even stranger. In Siberia, scientists have revived 30,000-year-old plants from seeds, preserved in permafrost, and microscopic animals called rotifers have been brought back to life after tens of thousands of years frozen. In our scenario, humans once used this same principle, only not for plants or tiny animals, but for themselves and the passengers they valued. A vault like this could be a pause button on a life pressed until the right moment to wake. Your guide, a quiet man with skin weathered by wind and eyes the color of slate, taps the ice with his knuckle. "We don't open," he says softly. "We keep." His words are simple, but you hear the weight of them. These vaults are not monuments. They are obligations. Someone has to keep the cold steady, the rock dry, the path clear enough for a return that no one in living memory has seen. The room has no furniture, no decoration, but the floor is lined with channels where meltwater runs, disappearing into unseen depths. It smells faintly of cedar smoke and iron, the scent of torches brought in for work, and then snuffed out. You notice scratches on the stone near one chamber marks that could be maintenance notes or warnings, or something closer to a greeting. You wonder if they're even in an earth language. Across the vast land of mountains that once remembered Pangaea, other vaults wait. Some are in deserts where air never carries enough moisture to rot anything. Others hide in glaciers, the walls glowing faintly with captured daylight. In our story, these vaults are spaced like beads on a necklace, linked by a quiet network of keepers who may not even know each other's names. They only share a purpose: to hold what the world is not yet ready to release. The guide lifts a hand and beckons you deeper. Your breath fogs again as you pass a low arch, the temperature dropping sharply. Here the chambers are smaller, the ice thicker. Through one layer you glimpse something like a coiled rope, only it's too smooth, too uniform, and it glimmers faintly as if made from a metal thread. Another holds a stack of crates bound in a weave of leather, and something you can't identify. The crates are marked with a spiral, the same spiral you saw on the strange metal bars days ago. A pattern emerges, and you feel a flicker of connection. Perhaps the vaults are not just holding individuals, but the knowledge and materials they would need when they wake. Your mind drifts to the science again, how deep cold slows chemical reactions to nearly nothing, how it can suspend decay for centuries. If someone had the skill and the patience, they could step out of one century and into another as easily as crossing a room. You picture a traveler climbing from the cradle you saw earlier, their breath clouding in the vault air, their eyes adjusting to light that has shifted color with the centuries. Would they remember the world they left, or would they feel like waking in a dream? The guide leads you back toward the entrance, his steps as steady as the drip of water somewhere in the dark. Near the threshold, you see a smooth round stone resting on a flat slab. He places a hand on it for a moment, eyes closed. You do the same. The stone is cold, but not unfriendly, as if it understands its role. "We keep," he repeats. You nod, knowing that in this world, those two words are as sacred as any oath. Outside, the air feels impossibly warm. The sun spills over the ridge, and for a moment you see the frost at the cave mouth sparkle like a scattering of stars. You think about the sleepers beneath, wrapped in stillness, waiting for a season, or a signal only they will know. Somewhere in the distance the wind shifts, carrying the scent of pine, and something sharper, almost metallic. You imagine it as the vault breathing just once to remind the world it hasn't forgotten. The mountain air still clings to your clothes as you descend toward the valley where the sky opens like a calm book. In this unified world, even a quiet horizon can carry the memory of storms. Not all journeys are exchanges of grain for stories, seed for song. Some are harder shaped by fear and friction, by the old human habit of bringing our arguments wherever we go. Tonight, the road leads you to the place where the stars once wore armor. War in the Stars does not look like a tapestry of blazing beams and roaring engines. It looks first like caution. It looks like someone dimming the lanterns, timing departures to avoid crossings, whispering new rules over old routes. It begins on the ground. Watch posts on ridgelines, signal fires quenched before dawn, tally marks scratched into door frames when a ship passes at the wrong hour. Above the traffic thins. Patterns you've learned to trust start to stutter. The sky is still busy, but now it is busy with restraint. A major historical event beats steadily beneath this chapter. July 1962, the high-altitude nuclear test called Starfish Prime lights the Pacific night and seeds an artificial radiation belt its electromagnetic pulse, knocking out streetlights in Hawaii and shorting satellites. In our imagined older world, a different kind of burst, no mushroom, no roar, still teaches the same lesson. You can wound the sky in ways that linger. Signals go hollow. Instruments sulk. Travelers reroute, then reroute again, until the map looks like a nervous heartbeat. You feel it in your chest, the way you feel a storm not yet here, already present. On the ground, people adapt with the old skill of making sense out of trouble. Riverkeepers hang bells under bridges. If a wave of air pressure rolls through, the bells tremble and warn downstream. Watchers put polished bowls of oil near doorways. A ripple on that calm surface means something big just passed in silence. The habits are small, but together they form a shield of attention. The first damage is invisible. A lane that once welcomed arrivals begins to spit them out at the edges. A valley that was kind to descents grows turbulent for no clear reason. Travelers arrive with headaches they didn't bring, with a shakiness in their hands, with stories of instruments that flickered like fireflies at dusk. The elders do what elders do. They remember the last time something felt off, and they tell the village how to make the day gentler, less light at night, fewer fires, more listening. Another event steadies the mind toward sanity. October 1967, nations sign the Outer Space Treaty, pledging not to place weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on celestial bodies, a legal lullaby for a nervous sky. In our story, there was an agreement too older than writing braided into trade and ritual. No burning the roads above, no salting the lanes with debris, no chasing an enemy through the dark, where children look up to sleep. Perhaps there were violations. There always are. But the rule existed, and that matters. It leaves a shape in the world, like a bed leaves a shape in a lawn, proof of rest even after the sleeper rises. You pass a hill where the grass is oddly short, as if clipped by wind that moved with teeth. The locals call it the quiet field. Once a ship came down too fast here, shedding pieces as a hawk sheds down, and the fragments still sulk under the soil. Workers with careful hands and iron patience spend seasons sifting, pulling glittering shards from the roots, with wooden tongs, placing each into clay jars lined with wool. They do not curse the sky. They tidy it. An unusual fact surfaces like a fish in the Byzantine world. Greek fire burned even on water, its exact composition still debated. A weapon that keeps burning where it shouldn't is a lesson dressed as a nightmare. In our imagined star conflict, there were devices that kept working where they shouldn't. Beacons that never quite died. Reflectors that flashed at wrong times. Little machines that crawled along fields of force, like spiders on glass. The fix was not always destruction. More often it was patience and geometry. Adjust the angles, change the timing, teach the sky to forget. Across the vast land of places that once remembered Pangaea, people think strategically with the tools they have. A coastal town paints its rooftops with soot to hide from high-altitude watchers. A mountain village strings thin lines of polished shell between peaks so that sunlight throws decoy glints, bright threads, to mislead unfriendly eyes. A desert settlement moves its markets to caves for a season, the buzz of trade replaced by the soft, muffled thrum of voices underground. None of it is panic. It is choreography, a long, low dance of staying small until the storm forgets your name. But the sky does not only remember fear. In this unified world, even conflict becomes a teacher. Young mapmakers learn to draw corridors that bend around danger like rivers around stone. Healers discover that a particular tea-bitter green, made from leaves that smell faintly of thunderstorms, soothes headaches brought on by geomagnetic fuss. Mechanics invent a way to ground a hull in mid-air by unspooling a thread of metal into the night until the ship stops crackling with held breath. When you sleep near the ridge, the wind snatches fragments of talk from the watchpost. Window opens at moonrise glint over the western pass. No, that's a planet. No, that's a lantern. No, that's a goat. The last bit earns a shared grin. Even in the hush, humor survives. It sharpens attention without cutting courage. You realize that vigilance sustained kind vigilance is a kind of peace, too. It says we will look after each other until the sky calms down. The patterns recover slowly. Routes reopen when debris falls harmlessly into the deep. Stations brighten their beacons by a fraction on market nights. Children return to the open fields at dusk to point and count and compete gently over who can name the most shapes before the first star truly appears. The damage does not vanish, but it is diluted by the steady pour of normal days. In this unified world, time is the best diplomat. It shakes hands with patience and introduces calm to the room. As you walk back toward the valley, you touch a standing stone that someone has wrapped with a thin band of copper. It is not an idol. It is a reminder this stone is a promise to behave better with the sky. The copper will green, the green will flake. Someone will polish it again. That cycle will outlast the memory of why it was wrapped in the first place, and the kindness will still remain embedded in the habit. You pause at the edge of a field and listen. Crickets, water in a ditch, a low conversation from a doorway. Up above, a slow-moving point of light does what it has done for your entire life, crosses from one edge of your attention to the other, without asking permission. Peace is not silence. It is the freedom to ignore a light because you trust it. It is the luxury of not ducking when air hums. It is the knowledge that the roads above are once again roads. When you finally lie down, the earth feels steady, the sky unarmed. Your last thought before sleep arrives is simple and old. May we keep learning the gentle version fast enough that we never need the other one again. The stars nod, or maybe that's just your breathing settling into a rhythm the night understands. Either way, the horizon loosens its shoulders and the dark becomes a blanket instead of a wall. The roots quiet, then open, then multiply. That's how it goes after a long season of caution. Someone makes the first crossing, then a second, then a third, and suddenly the road has a rhythm again. In this unified world, patterns invite courage, and courage invites people to pack. At first they go for trade, or to visit kin, or to keep a promise. Then some leave with more than provisions. They leave with seedlings and hearthstones with songs, and names for winds with the intent to stay. The great planetary diaspora does not begin with fanfare. It begins with a boat mindset aboard a ship, the quiet conviction that the horizon isn't the end, just where the next chapter lives. You watch the loading jars of grain, bundles of tools, coil after coil of rope, two small goats who look scandalized by the noise, and then proceed to nap with professional focus. There are also things that won't show in ledgers, a carefully folded story, a lullaby, a joke that always works on a worried child. A major historical heartbeat steadies the scene between roughly 1200 BCE and 1300 CE. The Polynesian expansion crossed the largest ocean on Earth, settling islands from Samoa and Tahiti to Hawaii, Rapa Nui, and Aotearoa, New Zealand. Double-hulled canoes, star paths, swell-reading bird flights used as clues, an entire technology stack made of attention and courage. In our imagined older skyfaring world, that same logic scales outward. Wayfinders become wayfinders again only. This time the birds are ion tails, the swells are solar winds, and the islands are warm orbs circling quiet suns. The method is unchanged. Memorize the sea until it becomes a map. Across the vast land of routes that once remembered Pangaea, departures take on a festival hush. A market closes early so hands can lift a household into the hold. A grinding stone, a rolled mat woven with a pattern that means safe harbor. A little clay god whose job is less about miracles and more about moral support. Children hang garlands on the handrails and promise to be brave. No one says goodbye. They say when. The difference is a rope thrown across time. Weeks later, months sometimes, there is arrival. The first footfall on the new world is not a leap. It's a test. The ground feels springy or stubborn or whispering with dust. The air tastes different, metallic sweet, a little like cedar, a little like snow. Someone kneels and presses a palm into the soil as if taking a pulse. They set a stone from the old hearth on a flat rock and breathe out. Suddenly the ship isn't a boundary, it's a bridge. Suddenly the horizon is behind you, doing what horizons do best, becoming home. The early days on a new world are all lists. Find water, test plants, watch the sky for tantrums, learn the local version of "don't touch that." Jokes help. A grid of shelter posts rises. A line of stones marks a tide that is not water, but weather, a daily shift when the air thins and thickens, like the ocean breathing. Lamps come on at dusk, their light reflecting in unfamiliar ways, and a routine takes root. Wake, mend, explore, record, share, sleep, repeat until it feels ordinary. An unusual fact flickers in from modern science. Like a friendly firefly, tardigrades, tiny bear-shaped microanimals, have survived exposure to the vacuum of space and intense radiation, rehydrating later to toddle on, as if they hadn't just done the universe's worst spa day. In our speculative past, colonists brought their own living toolkit seeds in clay capsules, yeast sleeping in honey. Hardy little organisms that could handle the rude shock of a new world. Survival kits learn to include both recipes and resurrections. The first farms are experiments disguised as patience. A garden plots itself in circles, testing soil in small rings, where failure wastes less. Moonfruit carried carefully in cool, dark takes root under a filtered sun and decides to be at home here too, leaves whispering a new accent in the wind. Goats chew with the solemnity of judges and then declare the local shrubs acceptable. A child names a stream after the sound it makes, hitting soft gravel, and suddenly maps have a heart. In this unified world, the diaspora never looks like abandonment. It looks like an echo with a memory. Colonies send letters the only way they can, beams nudged into patterns. Little packets of numbers that unfold into weather reports, lullabies, changes to recipes. Bake 6 parts grain, 2 parts moonfruit mash. Add a pinch of the green salt from the northern flats. Back on Earth, watch posts pin these messages to walls, stringing threads between the pins until the room looks like a spider tried to explain love with yarn. A second historical heartbeat joins the music long before compasses sailors everywhere. Carried canoe plants, the essentials of home transplanted across water. Bananas, breadfruit, taro, sugarcane. Archaeology finds their pollen and charcoal like signatures. In our skyfaring past, the canoe plants include not just food, but culture, a calendar tied to 2 suns, a festival, when the small moon casts a blue shadow, a taboo about singing near the spring, because the spring likes quiet. These are not superstitions. They are agreements with the place. Sometimes the shining path bends back. A settlement fails because the wind keeps breaking the roofs, or the rivers go dry in a cycle too long for patience. The returnees do not speak of failure. They speak of a world that taught them quickly. Back on Earth, they plant a tree for the land that didn't keep them, and they hang a bell in its branches. When the bell rings in a certain wind, people pause and nod respect for the teacher who said no. Not every colony stays small. A few find the gentle combination soil that welcomes seeds, air, that listens weather with a sense of humor, and they grow into towns, then tapestries of towns connected by roads that make a pleasing sound under cartwheels. A schoolyard chant comes back in a letter. In our house, we count 12 months by the tall plant's flowers. In our house, we count days by the slow star's wink. You smile thinking how children make astronomy into hand games faster than adults can draft the minutes. Across the vast land of distances that once remembered Pangaea, memory itself becomes an emigrant. A young carver on a far world shapes a standing stone with the same spiral you saw in the mountain vault, without ever knowing why that curve feels right. A baker invents a bread that cracks the same way the loaves back home used to, though the grain is not quite the same. A midwife hums a scale that matches Earth's old lullaby because certain intervals just fit in human throats. Culture is a homing device. It keeps finding the frequency of us. You visit a wayhouse perched in the velvet between worlds. Its windows are circles. Its floors are wood from trees grown under a different sun and brought here plank by plank because people wanted the smell of resin in the halls. On a wall, a long cloth records arrivals names cargo news. Hearthstone set. Good rain last 12. Please send more needles. The simple messages make your heart feel tidy, like drawers, where everything finally has a place. Back on Earth, still the anchor, still the first hearth stories change to make room. The old myths of gods who cross the sky learn to share the stage with aunties who do the same. Maps sprout soft edges, labeled with nicknames, the Blue Ring Bread World, Shy Dawn. Some scholars press for stricter terms. Most people shrug and keep using the ones that taste good in the mouth. Language goes where laughter leads. One evening, a beam arrives late, and wobbly the kind of message that makes watch posts go quiet and lean closer. It resolves into a song. Not a report, not a request. A song with a new lilt sung by voices that grew up under a different color of mourning. The final line is an invitation. When you can come meet the river that sings. Someone writes it on the door lintel in charcoal. Someone else brings bread. You stand in the doorway and imagine the first steps of a child on a distant bank, toes curled against cool stones, listening. In this unified world, the diaspora is not a rupture. It's a widening. The family table got longer. The soup pot grew, the ladle extended its reach, and when someone says grace, they add a few extra pauses to include the places where the day ends a little later, or starts a little bluer. You look up the familiar sky, the practiced paths, the lights that keep their promises, and you understand the quiet miracle. We didn't leave home. We taught the word home to mean more. The day you leave the last wayhouse for Earth, the journey is quiet. Space is never truly silent. Ships murmur to themselves a chorus of pumps and fans, and the slow creak of metal adjusting to temperature shifts. But in this unified world, there's a stillness that feels like a closing bracket. You're going home, but the road bends gently, and there's time yet to linger in the between. The long fall home begins not with speed, but with waiting. The ship drifts into alignment with the planet's gravity, while engines idle navigation lights winking a soft rhythm. Outside the porthole, Earth is not yet a globe, but a coin, shining and small. It looks fragile enough to hide in your palm, though you know its weight could hold the sky itself in place. A major historical thread hums beneath this moment. Apollo 8, December 1968, the first humans to orbit the moon and see Earth as a whole sphere rising over a barren horizon. The Earthrise photograph would go on to shift the world's self-image. In our imagined ancient history, there's no photograph, but the effect is the same. Every traveler who sees that pale curve against the dark brings the sight home in words and gestures in pauses before speaking in the way their eyes scan a crowd, as if counting to be sure everyone is still there. At first, Earth grows slowly. The journey's early stages feel like walking downhill on soft ground. You know you're moving, but it's not dramatic. You watch the constellations lean ever so slightly, bright points sliding into familiar arrangements. Someone jokes that the ship is falling into nostalgia. You chuckle, because that's exactly how it feels. The closer you come, the more the ship changes its habits. The lighting shifts to mimic the length of days below, easing your body back toward the planet's clock. Meals become simpler, dense bread greens, a little fruit, the kind of food that says, get ready to work again. Water is rationed for the final days, not because it's scarce, but because it's tradition. Arriving clean and steady is part of the courtesy paid to the ground. An unusual fact sneaks in. Unannounced returning astronauts often experience a space euphoria, a heightened sense of well-being, as they re-enter Earth's magnetic environment. In our story, the same thing hums through the cabin, a faint pressure, lifting from behind the eyes, an ease in the spine, a feeling like inhaling after holding your breath for years. You and the others glance at each other, smiling for no reason that needs explaining. The ship tilts, and Earth fills the window. You can see clouds now, bright wild swirls curling over ocean. Land masses stretch like sleeping animals under blankets of green and gold. Somewhere down there, fires burn for cooking, not for signal. Somewhere, someone is hanging laundry in the sun. Somewhere, the tide is turning, as it always has, pulling the sea back, for its own reasons. Descent begins with sound, not the deep roar of fiction, but a rising hiss as the hull leans into atmosphere. The ship trembles like a hand holding a note too long. Heat builds in the outer shell, invisible from where you sit, but you feel it in your bones as a prickling warmth. You imagine the air itself remembering you, shaping itself to your passage. Across the vast land of return sites that once remembered Pangaea, people are waiting. On the coast, a beacon burns at the edge of a cliff, its light sweeping the waves. In a mountain pass, watchers hold mirrors to catch the sun and flash it upward. In a plain where the grass bends all one way, someone has laid out stones in a spiral, knowing that from above, it will look like a familiar signature. Touchdown is never loud in this world. The ship lands like a leaf, deciding on a place to rest. Ropes are caught, mapes extended. Air from the outside rushes in full of the weight of soil and pollen and the slow work of seasons. You step onto the ramp and feel your legs argue briefly with the ground before settling the matter in favor of gravity. Crowds gather, but not too close. There's an understanding that return is a private thing at first. A child waves from behind a cluster of elders. You catch the motion in the corner of your eye and wave back the gesture, both ancient and brand new. You walk across packed earth toward the nearest shade. The air smells warm, with hints of cooking fires and green things bruised underfoot. In this unified world, the long fall home isn't a drop. It's a careful hand, placing you back where you belong. The horizon, familiar and infinite, greets you without fuss, as if you've only been gone a few hours. And maybe, in the scale of the universe, that's true. Later, under a roof that remembers rain, you'll tell the stories that belong to the ground, and leave the rest for the nights when the stars look restless. For now, you close your eyes and feel the floor solid under you. It doesn't move. Neither do you. The journey's bracket has closed. The sentence continues. Even after you return, the world does not stop leaving you clues. Paths you've walked 100 times begin to feel like sentences you hadn't finished reading. In this unified world, the ground is a library, and some of its books have been shelved under silt, under peat, under the patient handwriting of roots. The story that keeps tugging your sleeve is simple and enormous. The last starship sleeps beneath us. You don't start with a shovel. You start with listening. On a plain where reeds whisper and cattle pretend to ignore you, you watch swallows stitch the evening together. The wind drapes itself over the marsh and hums in one low, contented note. Someone once told you the trick on very still nights. A buried hull changes the way sound travels across the ground. The field acts different. You stand very still and let your bones do the hearing. They're barely an impedance, a hush that's not the wind. A major scientific historical heartbeat slips in, not to prove anything, but to set your spine humming. 1839, Suffolk, England. The first excavation at Sutton Hoo uncovers the ghost of a ship, a full-length burial where wood is gone, but its shape remains a negative held in soil, like a memory impressed on the earth. If an entire seagoing vessel can lie hidden until a patient trowel reveals its ribs in sand, then the idea of a sleeping skyboat beneath your feet feels less like wish and more like possibility. You mark a grid with twine and stakes. You don't disturb, not yet. You invite the gentler tools, ground-penetrating echoes, distant cousins of the drums, and claps people, once used to find caves. You bring a magnetometer, just a handheld wand, to taste for iron, the way a tongue tastes salt. The readouts look like quiet rain, then a smudge, then a pattern. A long curve. Another. A shape suggests itself between the numbers the way a shoreline suggests itself when fog decides to be kind. Unusual fact, soft as peat underfoot in Irish bogs, people have found bog butter, lumps of butter, stored in barrels and wrapped in bark, preserved for centuries by cold acid and tannins. The earth can keep a picnic for 1,000 years. It can certainly keep a hull, especially if the hull once told water to make way. You grin at the thought of the inventory list: hull fittings, seed jars, a coil of that glittering cable you saw through ice, and for morale a forgotten snack that now qualifies as archaeology. Across the vast land of places that once remembered Pangaea, you ask around. Old maps get unrolled. Someone mentions a glass patch on a mesa, black wavy, where lightning might have kissed the sand too long. Someone else remembers a place in the forest where nothing grows quite right, and the birds' calls hit a strange echo. A shepherd swears his flock always skirts a certain mound, circling as if the hill is a pond. People laugh kindly, then fall quiet. The mound goes on the list. You walk the mound at dawn. Dew beads on the grasses and soaks your ankles. The soil is springy, layered a cake baked by time. A hare bursts from the far side, back legs thumping like a drum roll. You kneel. The magnetometer purrs. Under 2 meters, a smear of signal. Under 5, a clear line. Under 7, a chorus. You look up not because help will fall from the sky, but because habit has taught you to say thank you in every direction. Care gathers. You call people who know how to be gentle with old things. A conservator arrives with hands that move like calm water. A surveyor hums and taps and laughs at her own bad jokes about baselines because nervous joy needs an outlet. The local council brings tea and asks sensible questions about permits and peat stability and how to keep the curious from standing where the ground is thin. You begin not with a trench, but with an opening big enough for breath. The first spade's bite smells like clean pennies and rain. You peel back turf in soft layers, rolling it like a blanket for later. The topsoil gives way to the color of old tea, then to something darker that clings to the blade. At the edge of your square, a line appears, straight, stubbornly straight, in a world that loves curves. A beam. A rib. Know something else, a seam that is not wood or stone. You pause and do the most scientific thing: you stop. You take notes. You take photographs. You lower the tempo. In this unified world, patience is a tool, not an accessory. The conservator kneels beside you, breath fogging in the cool morning. The seam has the faint sheen of the metals you handled in the little museum room, not mirror bright, but unbothered by time, as if rust sent a postcard and was told politely to try another address. The first reveal is not dramatic. It never is. It's a hand's width of edge, a plane that reflects the sky in a way Earth doesn't. You clear another few centimeters and find a shallow groove running along it, familiar, absurdly so. The spiral. The same tidy curve you've chased in vaults, on bars, in chants carved here, as if the maker could not help repeating a favorite chord. You sit back on your heels and exhale. The symbol isn't proof. It's hello. You widen the opening, working in a ring to keep the weight of the world distributed. Voices around you adjust to the register people use in good libraries. Someone finds a shard of something like glass, but thicker, tougher, with a structure that under a magnifier looks woven. A thread then, but of silica like fabric taught to be a window. You tuck it into a padded box, and your chest does a small, proud ache, the way it does when you lay out bread to cool, and the crust crackles a little song. A field school assembles almost overnight students with sunburned noses, elders with knees that warn of weather parents who brought their children to show them that slowness can be thrilling. Coffee appears as if conjured. A baker delivers round loaves with spirals scored on top, the jokes landing in the exact right place between reverent and silly. The sight fence becomes a gallery of drawings and guesses a fish, a boat, a seed, a sleeping moon. As weeks settle into the kind of rhythm that makes the heart steady, a shape grows in the ground, long low, slightly flattened by centuries of patience. It is not a sleek dart. It is a vessel in the older sense, a container of journeys, a body with intent. The nose curves under into a mouth that might be a hatch. Along the spine ribs, or the idea of ribs, suggests structure, the way a melody suggests a dance. You don't open it. Not this season. The conservator shakes their head, smiling, as if to say, the hardest part of love is not the singing, it's the waiting. Protocols grow like careful moss, stabilize, sample, document, wrap, rest. You place sensors that do not prod, but eavesdrop, listening for temperature, for microseisms, for the tiny conversation between object and dirt. At night, you leave the mound looking almost untouched, a quilt of tarps and turf that tells weather. Please be gentle. Across the vast land of distances that once remembered Pangea, the news travels not as a trumpet, but as a lullaby. Messages arrive from cousins under other suns' diagrams of joints, remembered maintenance rhymes. If the hinge won't sing, ask the spring drawings of tools that might fit a seam like this one. From the mountain keepers, a note that reads only, "We keep," and then after a pause, "and we are ready." You sit on the edge of the trench as dusk melts into a blue that's almost edible. The reeds flick their slender flames. A nightbird throws its voice across the water and tricks your ears into turning twice. Under your boots, something old and patient rests, not dead, not alive, but held like a breath. You lay a palm on the ground and speak aloud, not because the thing beneath can hear, but because you can. We found you. We'll take our time. In this unified world, discovery is a form of remembering. The last starship doesn't change who you are. It clarifies it. You were the kind of creature who watched the sky until it offered a road. You were the kind of creature who came home and folded the road into bread. And when the road hid under peat and stories and the green, stubborn work of grass, you were the kind of creature who listened until the earth answered. Now the pace eases, the sentences lengthen, and the night leans closer, as if the dark itself wants to rest a while beside you. The field is quiet, the tarps breathe a little with the breeze, and the mound is only a curve against a softer curve of sky. You let the day's edges blur. Details sink like stones into a clear pond, leaving only widening rings that touch and fade. It's enough for now to imagine a hand on cool soil, to feel the slight spring in the ground, where something waits without impatience. It's enough to hold the thread that runs from the river markets and singing stones and careful vaults to this small square of earth, where reeds write their thin poems. You don't need answers tonight. You need the comfort of questions that are gentle, that do not prod, that simply keep you company as your breathing slows. Somewhere far away, a weighhouse lamp is lowered. Somewhere higher up, a ship crosses the old lanes with the old courtesy dimming its lights for sleeping valleys. Somewhere under ice, a keeper checks a door and smiles at its familiar click. And here, just here, the grass exudes that green, cool smell that has tucked travelers in since there were feet to tire and roads to follow. You close your eyes. The field remains. The sky remains, the hush remains, and the story softens its voice until it is only the grain of sound. only the warmth of breath. If the ship beneath dreams, let it dream a little longer. If your thoughts drift, let them drift farther than the ridge and back again, like tides that never hurry. Everything that needs to be held is being held. Everything that needs to rest is resting. Good night.